I'm John Batchelor. Spies. I spy. It makes TV, it makes movies, and right now it makes uncomfortable the U.S. Navy. Because we're told within these last hours that there is a naval officer being held charged with espionage for China. He's an American origin out of Taiwan, Chinese. His name is Lin. We're also told that there's a defector, a senior spy defector from North Korea who defected last year to South Korea, and we're told today that he's available, so we're going to discuss that in this hour too. So it's a lot of I spy here in Asia. These are contentious moments, however, because all of these stories, both the suspect, the innocent till proven guilty, but the alleged espionage by a naval officer for China, and the North Korean defector, all of this involves China as a bad actor, as a suspicious actor against the United States and against its neighbors. I welcome my colleague and co-host, Thaddeus McCotter, WJR, the great voice of the Great Lakes, and Thaddeus and I both depend upon Gordon Chang for analysis of these unusual stories that we get, and they require dots to be connected. Gordon, a very good evening to you. The naval officer, I was surprised. We had the name, we have the accusations, we have lots of details, and the Navy connects this alleged espionage to China. The significance of this, Gordon, following the recent conversations between the President of the United States and Xi Jinping, and the breakdown of relations between the United States and China over the South China Sea, the U.S. Navy involved. Are these all to be connected, Gordon? A very good evening to you.
Good evening, John and Thaddeus. Lieutenant Commander Edward Lin was is Taiwanese, naturalized U.S. citizen. He was participating in the EP3 program, and that means that he was involved in the flights across China's coast. And so, therefore, he learned a lot of technology about what the U.S. was looking for, what we were capable of, and that probably is permitting the Chinese to be able to defeat the technology of the EP3. He's being held in a brig in Chesapeake, Virginia, which is just a few miles from where I am, because I'm in Norfolk and about to give a presentation to the Navy tomorrow. And the thing that is personal to me is that here you have essentially a Chinese-American who's involved in spying for China. The Chinese-American community has been very lax on calling out members that have been working for Beijing. And this is something that we really need to do, because American citizens are going to be really concerned about the loyalty of those of Chinese origin.
Thaddeus?
Gordon, regarding the military specifically, is this an isolated incident, or do you believe it's part of a larger organized effort by the Communist Chinese to infiltrate the American military?
Well, I think that, of course, that it's part of a larger organized effort. And, of course, they're going to be spying on the U.S. What is important about this, at least from my perspective, is that they are using Chinese Americans, or people, in this case, Taiwanese, who they consider to be Chinese, and therefore they are trying to play on their loyalties. And, of course, the Chinese American community has supported Communist China in the past. I can sort of understand why, but it's got to stop. You know, we had this whole issue of Wen-Ho Lee about 7-8 years ago, and again, we have somebody of basically, Taiwanese origin helping China. I mean, this is, and the Chinese Americans don't seem to think it's a big deal. They seem to criticize the FBI. They don't criticize the guy who was lax in handling classified information, and perhaps in Wen-Ho Lee's case, helped China.
Panama Papers. A new story. I'm looking at the Voice of America filing this. The son of China's late reformist leader, Hu Yaobang, rejected news media reports that he used his father's Beijing address when registering an offshore company in 2003, threatening to sue any media outlets that continue reporting on allegations disclosed in the so-called Panama Papers. Gordon, I guess we must prepare to be sued, because we're about to talk about this. What generation of leadership does this connect to? If Xi Jinping, the present troubled dictator, is the fifth generation, which one is this talking about?
This is the second-generation leader. You have Deng Xiaoping, who followed Mao Zedong, so it's number 2. Hu Yaobang was a leader who was actually fired by Deng, and of course, he has a great reputation in China because he was a reformer. And now you have his son, who established an offshore company, and not technically by itself illegal, but nonetheless, people don't establish offshore companies unless they're trying to hide something. And so, therefore, all of the people in China who have been connected with the Mossack Fonseca firm, that's the Panamanian firm, have probably a lot to answer for. And so that's a case where he's trying to go on the offense to deflect the issues, saying, oh, there was sort of like a technical mistake made by the media. But the bigger issue is not what address he used, but the question is, why did he have the company in the first place?
Chinese censors have been deleting social media threads with the word Panama. That's the forbidden word tonight. Thaddeus?
Panama.
Panama, yes, you did it.
I guess they won't be listening to the Van Halen tune over there anytime soon. Gordon, there's a deep irony at work here that a communist regime that is censoring the social network and is repressive in terms of its own citizens' free speech would come over to the United States and try to find out what it's all about in a court of law. I mean, they clearly are just doing this as an intimidation tactic. This princeling can't have any inkling that he's actually going to win over here. No,
I mean, if the media made a mistake in terms of the address that was used for this offshore company, it's a technical mistake. And obviously there's a lot going on here because you have 9 members or former members of the Politburo Standing Committee, which is the apex of political power in China. You have them connected through relatives to tax haven companies. And Mossack Fonseca, it's had like 7 offices in China, which is just astounding. Most of its, or a good portion of its business, was actually in Hong Kong and in China. And that's a real indication about the money that has been shuffled offshore by Chinese communist leaders. These are people who are supposed to be leading China towards the perfect state of communism, but that's not exactly what was going on here.
Gordon, you have a story up right now at Forbes about Beijing, the renminbi as foreign exchange. I read through it, and what I basically understand is that China continues to try to adjust the facts to conceal or to maintain denial that its economy is in tatters.
What's going on here is that everyone has been looking at the size of China's foreign exchange reserves to see how much money they have available to defend the value of the renminbi, which is under attack by hedge firms across the world. And apparently what they have been doing is they've been selling foreign exchange, converting it into renminbi, the local currency, and then counting the assets that are denominated in renminbi in their foreign exchange reserves, which is wrong from any number of perspectives. For instance, it's not foreign, it's not foreign exchange, it's not currency. And so clearly there is a problem here. And so questions are being raised right now about a particular holding company that appears to be still counted as foreign exchange. And these are questions that are going to continue because there's tens of billions of dollars in the world right now that are riding on the value of the renminbi.
Thaddeus?
Well, Gordon, isn't it, again, to bring it back round to full circle, when you have the communist Chinese leaders, obviously there's a threat to themselves based on corruption, but when they're shipping money offshore, isn't that the real fact and evidence that their economy is in tatters?
Absolutely. Last year Bloomberg said that there was $1 trillion of net capital outflow. Our friend Ann Stevenson Yang said, well, it's maybe only $911 billion. But she's been computing some figures about the net capital outflow for the first 2 months, and I'll let her disclose them, but they are absolutely astounding, which really means that the outflow has not been trimmed as many people suspect, that clearly people in China are still concerned about the value of the renminbi, still concerned about the direction of the political system, and indeed of the economy itself, and therefore are expressing their confidence, or lack of it, by taking what they have and pushing it offshore.
Gordon, we began with the story of the alleged espionage by an officer in the U.S. Navy. I want to come back to that because we have for weeks now reported on a pending conflict in the South China Sea. Does China have a plan to subvert the U.S. Navy, Gordon? Are they at that scale? That is war.
Well, they certainly do. I mean, and clearly they want to be able to defeat the Navy's reconnaissance platforms, including the EP-3, which...
but they're not going to stop at the EP-3, Gordon. We have a fleet out there.
We do, and including the P-8 Poseidon, which is a more sophisticated aircraft. The Chinese would certainly like to learn how to defeat that. And this is important because the United States is trying to maintain peace and stability in the region, and it's a very difficult job, and we don't need traitors, especially those who come from Asia.
It reminds me, Gordon, of how intelligence operations started in the 1920s in Tokyo. That's what it reminds me of.
Yes.
20 years before the war, the intelligence operations begin, and those are the baby steps of warfare.
And it's also a story about Chinese Americans in the United States who may not be loyal to the U.S. And this is, of course, personal interest to me in my life because we're concerned about how our community is viewed in the United States and whether we're considered to be loyal. Remember in Japan, in World War II, the Japanese were interned.
Yes, I remember it exactly, and that's why it's so unhappy. Gordon Chang, The Daily Beast, Thaddeus McCotter, WJR, the great voice of the Great Lakes. I hope the officer in question is not guilty. I'm John Batchelor.